Cassidy Murphy's knees ached as if she had spent the entire day on rocks. The scent of lemon cleaner had permeated her hands so thoroughly that it seemed as if it would never dissipate. She was repositioning the floor polisher for the third time, attempting to remove a stubborn stain from the marble floor in the hallway of the Richardson mansion. "Damn brush," Cassidy muttered, turning off the machine and crouching down to examine the mechanism. "It's jammed again." It was 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and the owners of the house were still asleep. Cassidy preferred to work at this hour. Fewer eyes, fewer awkward moments when you become invisible in your own presence. Rich people had an uncanny ability to look through their servants as if they were pieces of furniture. She pulled the tangled hair and carpet fibers out of the brush. The same problem again. The bristles caught on the irregularly shaped bristles, got tangled up, and blocked the movement. The designers of these machines had clearly never used them. The phone in her back jeans pocket vibrated. Cassidy wiped her hands on her uniform apron and looked at the screen. A message from her mother. "Don't forget dinner tonight at 6. Dad insists." Cassidy grimaced. The monthly family dinners always turned into an interrogation. "How's work?" Which really meant, "Haven't you found a decent job yet?" Then the inevitable, "When are you going back to college?" And then, the most painful from her father. "It's a shame you're wasting your potential." She sent a short "I will" and returned to her work. 4 more houses today, and she had to finish by 5 to get home, change, and drive to her parents' house. When Cassidy finished with the Richardsons' mansion, her watch read 8:30. She carefully packed her equipment into the trunk of her old 2006 Ford and drove to the next address. The radio played old rock hits softly as she made her way through the Saturday morning traffic in Minneapolis. Outside the window, the luxurious homes of the Kenwood neighborhood she cleaned in passed by, a stark contrast to her own neighborhood of Phillips, where she was headed after work. Her life was divided in two. Here she was polishing crystal chandeliers, and there she was trying to fix a leaky faucet in her tiny apartment. At the next house, she was greeted by Mrs. Haywood, a gray-haired woman with perfectly manicured nails and cold eyes. "Pay special attention to your husband's study," she said, barely glancing at Cassidy. "We're having guests tonight." "Of course, ma'am." Cassidy nodded and began to take the equipment out of the cart. "And please use the special cleaner for antique wood." Someone left streaks last time. Cassidy clenched her teeth. Someone was her, the only cleaner who had worked in this house for the past 6 months. An invisible woman with a name no one could remember. "I'm so sorry about that, Mrs. Haywood. It won't happen again." When the lady of the house left, Cassidy sighed heavily and got to work. Scrub, polish, vacuum, wash. A ritual performed with automatic precision. 3 years ago, she had imagined her life very differently. She was supposed to graduate from engineering school, specializing in mechanics and robotics. Her professors predicted a bright future for her. "You have exceptional spatial thinking, Miss Murphy," her research advisor had said. Then her father lost his job at the factory, her mother fell ill, and the family's modest savings were only enough to pay for medical treatment. Her studies took a back seat. At first temporarily, but then temporary became permanent, and Cassidy found herself with an unfinished education and college debts. By lunchtime, she was already finishing her 3rd house of the day. The floor cleaner had broken down again, and the brush was completely clogged with hair and dust. Cassidy spent 20 minutes cleaning it out before finally deciding to just use a mop. Technology designed to make life easier often only made it more complicated. Snacking on a sandwich in her car between calls, she opened her notebook. Dozens of sketches had accumulated in the margins of the last few pages, ideas for improvements to various cleaning appliances. It was a habit she'd picked up in college, always keep a notebook handy for sudden flashes of inspiration. She added a few notes to her latest sketch of a new brush design. If she changed the shape and angle of the bristles, added a protective barrier, it could work. The last customer of the day, Dr. Nolan Pierce, was one of the few who actually noticed her presence. He lived alone in a spacious house filled with books and strange mechanical devices. An engineer, by the looks of it. The house wasn't the most luxurious among her clients, but it was definitely the most interesting. Good afternoon, Miss Murphy. He always called her by her last name, which strangely made her feel important. I'll be in the workshop as usual. If you need anything, just knock. Thank you, Dr. Pierce. His house was the only place where she didn't feel invisible, perhaps because he knew what it was like to be unnoticed. He once mentioned that he had been a technical genius behind the scenes at a large company. When she finished work, Cassidy hurried home to get ready for a family dinner. Her apartment was a tiny studio overlooking the brick wall of the neighboring building, but it was clean and cozy, a professional habit. In the corner of the room stood a small desk covered with drawings and parts from dismantled appliances. It was a small oasis where she could still feel like an engineer, not just a cleaner. After changing into her only decent dress, Cassidy drove to the suburbs, where her parents lived in a modest 2-story house. Fletcher, her younger brother, was in his junior year of college, and her father never missed an opportunity to remind her of the difference between their career paths. When she pulled up to the house, all the lights were on. Her old Ford looked ridiculous next to her father's brand-new pickup truck. Wade Murphy, a former factory worker and now a construction foreman, prided himself on his ability to bounce back. He expected the same from his daughter. "Here's our hard worker," her father announced as she entered the living room. "Sit down, the stew is ready." Her mother, Elaine, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face, softer than her father's, lit up with a smile. "How was your week, sweetie?" "Fine," Cassidy shrugged. "Nothing special." "Still working for the same cleaning company?" Fletcher asked, coming out of his room. "Yes," Cassidy nodded. "How long has it been? 3 years?" Her father shook his head. "And did you get a raise?" "I got 3 new regular clients," Cassidy replied. "They pay well." "But you're still cleaning other people's houses," Wade remarked. They sat down at the table. Their mother served dinner, and their father opened a bottle of cheap wine. The ritual that Cassidy privately called the smiling interrogation began. "Fletcher got an internship at an engineering firm," their mother announced, "for the summer." "Congratulations," Cassidy smiled sincerely at her brother. "Yeah, the pay's not great, but the experience is invaluable," Fletcher added. "Plus, there's a chance of getting a permanent position after graduation." "That's the right approach," her father nodded. "Build a career. Don't get stuck in the first job that comes along." Cassidy focused on her plate, trying to ignore the barbs. "Cass, have you thought about going back to college?" her mother asked. "Maybe online? You had such good grades." "Now's not the best time, Mom," Cassidy replied. "I'm still paying off my previous loans." "It's never the best time if you don't make an effort," her father remarked. "At your age, I was already a foreman's assistant, and I didn't even have a diploma." "My situation is different." "How so?" Wade took a sip of wine. "You're young and healthy. What's stopping you?" "Maybe she's happy where she is," Fletcher interjected. "Happy?" her father laughed. "A pathetic girl, still cleaning other people's houses. Are you going to spend your whole life running errands for rich people? They don't even know your name." "Wade!" her mother scolded him. Cassidy felt a hot wave of anger rise in her throat, but she held it back. It was a familiar dance. If she snapped back, it would only get worse. "I'm doing fine," she said evenly. "I pay my bills. I don't ask for help." "And that's the extent of your ambition?" Her father shook his head. "Pay your bills with your brain?" "I have plans," Cassidy said. "Like what? Become a senior cleaning lady?" Wade snorted. Dinner continued in the same vein. Fletcher tried to lighten the mood with stories about school. Her mother brought up neutral topics. Her father invariably returned to Cassidy's wasted potential. When she finally got into the car to drive home, it was almost 9 o'clock. Her hands trembled slightly from suppressed anger and resentment. Pathetic girl. The words stung, despite years of similar comments. The worst part was that somewhere deep down, a tiny part of her soul feared that her father was right. Back at her apartment, Cassidy kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. Her phone beeped. A message from Fletcher. "Sorry about my dad. You deserve better." She smiled. Her brother had always been on her side, despite his success. He was the only one who knew she was still working on engineering projects. Her gaze fell on the desk with her sketches. Today's battle with the floor cleaner had once again reminded her of the fundamental flaw in the brushes. They simply weren't designed for real-world use. Cassidy got up, walked over to the table, and turned on the lamp. She took out a clean sheet of paper and began to draw. The basic problem was the geometry of the bristles and the lack of protection against hair and lint getting caught in them. If she could create a two-tiered system with different angles of inclination and add a simple barrier element, the idea was simple but potentially effective. Professor Reeves at college always said that genius often manifests itself in simple solutions to complex problems. "Well, Professor," Cassidy muttered as she drew the details, "let's see if I really was one of your best students." The night flew by unnoticed. When the first rays of sunlight streamed through the apartment window, the finished drawing of a new floor brush design lay on the table, the result of 3 years of practical experience and an unfinished engineering education. Cassidy stretched, loosening her stiff back. Sunday was her only day off, but today she had no intention of resting. The desk drawer contained parts from dismantled mechanisms, and now it was time to assemble the first prototype. Perhaps her father was right, and she really was a pathetic girl cleaning other people's houses. But looking at the drawings, Cassidy felt that this wasn't forever. Cassidy woke up feeling as if she had never gone to bed. Her head was buzzing from lack of sleep, but there was a strange feeling of anticipation in her chest. Glancing at the clock, she realized she had slept only 3 hours after spending the night working on her drawings. The prototype toothbrush lay on the table, a clumsy construction of plastic parts, wire, and silicone elements from old kitchen utensils. The first version looked like something between an alien artifact and a child's craft project. But Cassidy knew that it wasn't the appearance that mattered, but the principle behind it. 2 key innovations would solve the problem. First, a 2-tiered system of bristles with different stiffnesses and angles. The lower tier would be stiffer for basic cleaning. The upper tier would be soft for polishing and directing debris. Second, a simple but effective barrier to prevent hair and threads from getting tangled around the shaft. Cassidy stretched and headed for the tiny bathroom. A cold shower helped clear her head. Glancing at herself in the mirror, she ran her hand over the dark circles under her eyes. "Look at you, Murphy," she muttered, trying to smooth her unruly reddish hair. Sunday was her only day off, but there was no question of rest today. After a quick breakfast, she bent over the prototype again. Attaching it to a standard floor polisher proved more difficult than she had initially thought. "I need something universal," she muttered, trying out different options. "Something that will fit most models." By lunchtime, the first version of the adapter was ready, a clamp with an adjustable diameter. Cassidy connected the prototype to her old floor cleaner. Everything clicked into place with a satisfying click. Due to her limited budget, she used everything she could find at the hardware store and at sales of old appliances. The first functional prototype cost her $47, half of her weekly grocery budget. Cassidy spent the next few hours testing the prototype on different surfaces: laminate flooring in the kitchen, tiles in the bathroom, even a small rug in the hallway. The results were encouraging. Hair and threads didn't get tangled in the brush, and debris was effectively collected and directed into the collection compartment. "Not bad for a first try," she smiled, examining the result. But the real tests had to be done in real-life conditions. The next day, she carefully packed the prototype in a bag and headed to work. First on the list was the Devonport family home, a married couple who seemed unable to go a day without a party. Their floors always required special attention. "Good morning, Carrie," greeted the hostess as usual, getting her name wrong. "Good morning, Mrs. Devonport." "Cassidy," she corrected politely. "Yes, of course," the woman nodded absently. "We had a small party yesterday, so the living room might be a little messy." A little messy turned out to be a veritable battlefield: wine stains on the light-colored carpet, crumbs from snacks everywhere, confetti scattered about, and several broken glasses. "Amazing," Cassidy sighed and got to work. When it came to washing the floor, she decided to test her prototype. She removed the standard brush from the floor cleaner, installed her invention, and turned on the device. For the first few minutes, she watched every movement of the machine, ready to stop the experiment at any moment. But the brush worked flawlessly, picking up debris, not getting stuck in the carpet fringe, and effectively cleaning even stubborn stains. "It can't be," Cassidy whispered, as she watched her invention tackle dirt that would normally have to be scrubbed by hand. The time spent cleaning the living room was cut in half. No more stops to clean a clogged brush. No more missed spots due to inefficient pressure distribution. Next on the list was Mrs. Haywood's house. It had mostly wooden floors, which required special care. "I hope you're using the right product today," Mrs. Haywood reminded her, not even trying to hide her irritation. "Of course, ma'am," Cassidy nodded. "A special formula for antique wood." After the lady of the house left, she set up her prototype again. The brush worked even better on delicate wooden surfaces. The two-level system provided both thorough cleaning and gentle polishing. By the end of the workday, Cassidy was euphoric. Her invention didn't just work, it exceeded all expectations. Last on her list was the home of Dr. Pierce, the only client she could call a friend. When she pulled up to his house, it was already getting dark. November days in Minneapolis were getting shorter, plunging the city into twilight by 4 o'clock. "Good evening, Miss Murphy," Dr. Pierce greeted her as he opened the door. "You're later than usual." "I was busy at the Haywoods' house," she explained. "Antique wood." "Ah, Mrs. Perfection." He nodded with an understanding smile. "I won't disturb you. I'll be in the workshop if you need me." Cassidy began cleaning, once again using her prototype. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Dr. Pierce had returned to the living room and had been watching her for several minutes. "An interesting modification," he remarked, pointing to the floor polisher. "I've never seen one like that before." Cassidy flinched at the surprise. "It's an experiment," she admitted. "I'm working on improving the standard brush." "May I take a look?" Pierce asked with interest. Cassidy hesitated. On the one hand, her idea was still raw. On the other hand, it might seem naive or obvious to a mechanical engineer. "Sure," she finally decided, turning off the machine. Nolan Pierce knelt down next to the device, carefully studying its design. His hands, the hands of a man accustomed to working with mechanisms, gently felt the details of the brush. "Two-level bristles with opposite angles," he muttered. "And this barrier. A brilliantly simple solution. Did you design it yourself?" "Yes," Cassidy nodded. I studied engineering, in college." "Where exactly?" "Minnesota Tech, but I didn't finish." Pierce looked at her intently. "That's a shame. You clearly have a talent for this. Does it solve the problem of debris getting caught in the brush?" "Yes, and more than that. Cleaning efficiency has also improved," she explained, feeling a surge of enthusiasm. "The design ensures optimal pressure distribution across the surface, and the double row of bristles prevents debris from being thrown out." She didn't notice that she had switched to professional jargon she hadn't used since college. "Impressive," Pierce nodded. "And it works on all surfaces?" "I've tested it on hardwood, marble, laminate, and tile. The results are excellent everywhere. Especially with long hair and fur, they no longer get stuck in the mechanism." "That solves a serious problem in the industry," Pierce remarked. "Have you thought about patenting it?" Cassidy laughed. "Patenting it? No, it's just to make my job easier." "Miss Murphy," Pierce said seriously, "you've created a fundamentally new design that solves a real problem. This isn't just an improvement, it's an innovation." He stood up and pointed to his workshop. "Would you like to discuss this further? I think you should seriously consider patenting it." Cassidy nodded uncertainly and followed him. Dr. Pierce's workshop was an engineer's paradise: modern machines, a 3D printer, a computer with professional design software. "You said you used to be an engineer," Cassidy remarked, looking around. "I still do," Pierce smiled. "Although now I work for myself rather than a corporation. I consult for several companies and develop my own projects." He sat down at the computer and opened a browser. "Let's take a look at similar products on the market." They spent the next hour studying existing models of floor brushes for cleaning machines. To Cassidy's surprise, no one had yet implemented the idea of a two-level system with a barrier. "See?" Pierce pointed to the screen. Your solution is unique. Competitors either complicate the design with expensive components or ignore the problem altogether. But filing a patent, Cassidy shook her head. That's expensive and complicated. I don't have the resources. Pierce tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. I can help, with the paperwork and the financing. Why? Cassidy asked bluntly. Because I see potential, he replied. And because someone once helped me in exactly the same way, now it's my turn. He held out his hand to her. I'm offering you a partnership. I'll help with the patent and the first prototypes, and you retain control of the rights. Let's say 70-30 in your favor? Cassidy hesitated. The offer seemed too good to be true. I don't want charity, she finally said. This isn't charity, Miss Murphy, Pierce replied seriously. It's an investment. I'm an engineer and a businessman, not a philanthropist. Your invention is worth money, and I want my share. Simple. Something about his directness convinced Cassidy. She shook his outstretched hand. It's a deal. Excellent, Pierce nodded. Then let's get started on a real prototype. Your current version proves the concept, but we need something more professional. The next 2 weeks flew by at a feverish pace. Cassidy continued to work as a cleaner during the day and spent her evenings in Pierce's workshop. They improved the design, experimented with materials, and created digital models. Pierce proved to be not only a talented engineer, but also a patient mentor. He helped her fill in the gaps in her knowledge, gently guiding her but never stifling her ideas. The key to a successful invention is its simplicity, he said. The best innovations are intuitive. Like your brush, everyone who sees it in action instantly understands its value. When the third prototype was ready, they decided to conduct real-world testing. Pierce contacted a professional cleaning company that serviced office buildings and offered to test the new design. If they approve, it will be the first step toward commercialization, he explained to Cassidy. The day of the presentation was nerve-wracking. Cassidy had never presented her ideas to professionals before. Pierce insisted that she do the demonstration. It's your invention, Miss Murphy, he said. You know its merits better than anyone. The cleaning company's office was located in an industrial area of Minneapolis. The equipment manager, a stern woman with 30 years of experience in the industry, greeted them with a skeptical look. So it's a miracle brush? She snorted. I've seen dozens of these revolutions. Usually it's just a marketing ploy. Let me show you, Cassidy replied calmly. A special area was prepared for testing, with different floor coverings strewn with typical debris, hair, dust, and small particles. They even installed strips of carpet fringe, a real test for any floor cleaning machine. Cassidy installed her prototype on a standard company machine and began cleaning, the room filled with the quiet hum of the motor. The brush glided flawlessly over all surfaces, not getting stuck even in the fringe, not splashing water, and effectively collecting all the debris. When she finished the demonstration, the room fell silent. Okay, the manager finally said. Now show me what's inside. Cassidy removed the brush and revealed the clean mechanism. No tangled hair, no clogged particles. The manager took the brush, examined it closely, then shook her head. I've been in this business for 32 years. I've never seen anything like this. How complicated is it to manufacture? No more complicated than standard models, Pierce replied. With the right scale, the cost will be even lower. We have 200 cars in our fleet, the manager said thoughtfully. If your brush is really that effective, we could increase productivity by at least 20%. She handed Cassidy her business card. I'm interested. When you have a patent and a production plan, please contact me. We are ready to be your first customers. On the way back to Pierce's workshop, Cassidy couldn't help smiling. For the first time in a long time, she felt that her abilities were appreciated. Didn't you tell me you used to work for that company? Pierce asked, as they sat down with a cup of coffee in his living room. Yes, for about a year after college, Cassidy nodded. But I left to do custom work. The pay is better. I wonder if she recognized you. Hardly, Cassidy smiled. I was one of hundreds of cleaners. People like me are usually invisible. Pierce looked at her intently. You know what sets a true inventor apart? the ability to see what others don't. You spent years observing a problem that everyone else took for granted, and you found a solution. That's talent, Miss Murphy. Real talent. The next day, they filed a preliminary patent application. The process was expensive and complicated, but Pierce kept his promise and covered all the costs. "Now we need to create a business plan," he said when the documents were sent off, "and think about production." "Maybe we should start small," suggested Cassidy. "Find a small factory that can produce the first batch?" "That's reasonable," agreed Pierce. "But there's a problem. Most manufacturers will require a minimum order of several thousand units. That's a serious investment." He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "I have a friend in China who runs a small factory. He might agree to a smaller batch, but even so, we'll need about $50,000. Cassidy felt her enthusiasm wane. Such sums were far beyond her means. "I can invest part of it," Pierce continued, as if reading her mind. "Let's say $30,000. We'll have to find the rest from venture capitalists." "They'll want a big share." Cassidy frowned. "Not necessarily," Pierce shook his head. "It all depends on how we present the project. You don't just have an innovative product, you have a unique story. Investors love narratives like that. A talented engineer who, due to circumstances, worked as a janitor but never gave up on his dream and created an invention that revolutionized the industry." Cassidy grimaced. "Sounds like a saccharine story for social media." "Maybe," Pierce smiled. "But it's true. And that truth can open doors that are usually closed to newcomers without connections." He took out his laptop. "Let's put together a presentation. There's a startup conference coming up in Minneapolis. It's the perfect opportunity to present your idea to potential investors." The next week was spent preparing. Cassidy continued to work during the day, but now she rushed to Pierce's workshop after work. They created a presentation, honed their pitch, and prepared financial calculations. Pierce turned out to be not only a talented engineer, but also an experienced businessman. "Remember," he said, "investors invest not so much in the product as in the people. You are the heart of this project. Your passion, your knowledge of the problem, your engineering vision, that's what should be at the center of the presentation." The day of the conference arrived too quickly. Cassidy, who had never spoken in public before, was terrified. She put on the only business suit she had bought for job interviews after college and checked her presentation on her tablet several times. "I'm not ready," she admitted to Pierce when they met at the entrance to the conference center. "You're more ready than you think," he replied confidently. "Just be yourself and talk about what you know best, your invention." The conference turned out to be a huge event with hundreds of participants. Startups from Minneapolis and other cities presented their projects in hopes of attracting funding. Most were much more prepared and experienced than Cassidy. "Don't compare yourself to them," Pierce said quietly, noticing her tension. "You have something that many don't, a real product that solves a real problem that you've personally experienced." Their presentation was scheduled for the afternoon. By then, Cassidy had listened to a dozen other presentations, ranging from food delivery apps to online education platforms. Some seemed so polished and professional that her confidence wavered again. "5 minutes until you go on," the organizer announced. Cassidy took a deep breath and clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. "You can do this," Pierce encouraged her. "Just remember, your toothbrush isn't just a toothbrush. It's a symbol of determination, innovation, and the ability to see opportunities where others see only routine." Cassidy nodded and stepped onto the stage. The bright spotlight blinded her for a moment, but when her vision returned, she saw the audience, investors, entrepreneurs, and journalists waiting for her presentation. "Good afternoon," she began, surprised at the firmness of her voice. "My name is Cassidy Murphy, and I'm going to tell you how a simple brush can revolutionize the cleaning industry." She launched her presentation, and a video appeared on the screen showing her invention in action compared to standard brushes. The contrast was obvious even to people who knew nothing about cleaning. "This problem costs cleaning companies millions of dollars every year," she continued. "Inefficient brushes lead to constant breakdowns, reduced productivity, and increased cleaning time. My solution increases efficiency by 25% and completely eliminates the problem of clogging. With every word, her confidence grew. She talked about her work experience, how she observed the problem from the inside, and the process of developing the solution. Then she moved on to the financial calculations, the potential market, production costs, and estimated profits. "We're not just creating a product," she concluded. "We are offering a new standard for the industry that will make the work of millions of people more efficient and less exhausting." When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Several investors immediately approached her, handing her their business cards and offering to meet to discuss the details. "It was like you were a different person on stage," Pierce remarked when they finally managed to step aside. "You spoke with such confidence and knowledge." "I just told them what I know," Cassidy shrugged, still not believing in her success. "That's what makes a presentation convincing," he nodded. "We already have 5 potential investors who want to meet next week, and I'm sure there will be more." Cassidy looked at the stack of business cards she had collected and felt a strange, long-forgotten feeling growing inside her. It wasn't just hope, it was confidence. Confidence that her life was finally starting to change, and that the brush that began as a simple solution to make her job easier could really become something much bigger. After a successful presentation at the startup conference, everything spun at a dizzying speed. Cassidy found herself in a world she had only heard about before: meetings with investors, negotiations about shares, the legal intricacies of setting up a company. "Don't worry, I'll be there every step of the way," Pierce assured her before her first serious meeting. "Just be honest and confident in your product." Investors can sense uncertainty. Cassidy nodded, though inside she was tense. She still couldn't believe that her simple idea had generated so much interest. They chose Blue Harbor Ventures, a small fund specializing in industrial innovation, as their lead investor. Its director, Marcus Holt, immediately recognized the brush's potential. "The cleaning market is huge and stable," he remarked during the meeting, "and the fact that you know it from the inside gives you a unique advantage. Many startups try to solve problems they haven't experienced themselves." The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. Holt offered $200,000 for 15% of the company, a valuation that exceeded Cassidy's wildest expectations. "That's a very generous offer," Pierce acknowledged as they discussed the terms. "But you have a really strong product, and I advise you to accept. Holt isn't just giving you money, he's opening doors to other investors and partners." The patent office had already accepted their preliminary application, and now Blue Harbor's lawyers were helping with the full patent application. The process was more complicated than Cassidy had imagined. Dozens of documents, drawings, and descriptions had to be prepared. "Why can't we just show them a working prototype?" she asked in desperation when the lawyer returned the latest version of the documentation with notes. "Because a patent protects the idea, not the device," Pierce explained patiently. "We need to clearly define what exactly we want to patent, otherwise competitors will be able to circumvent our patent by slightly changing the design." In parallel with the patent, they were busy registering the company. The name came spontaneously: Castech Innovations. Cassidy insisted on innovations instead of the obvious cleaning. She wanted the company to not be limited to a single brush, but to become a platform for her future ideas. Quitting her job was both scary and exciting. On her last day at the cleaning company, Cassidy experienced a strange feeling, as if she were closing an important chapter in her life. "Are you going to work for the competition?" her boss joked as he accepted her resignation. "You could say that," she smiled, without going into details. Most of her clients didn't even notice she was gone. To them, she was just a nameless cleaner who could easily be replaced. Only Dr. Pierce, who had become her partner, and Mrs. Davenport, who had finally remembered her name, wished her luck. The first Castech office was a tiny space in a tech park on the outskirts of Minneapolis. 2 rooms with basic furniture and fast internet were more than enough for a startup with 2 employees. Cassidy and Pierce were the only employees of the company in the first few months. "We need to find a manufacturer," Pierce said when the first part of the investment arrived in the company's account. "I contacted my contact in Shenzhen, but they can't take the order for another 3 months. That's too long." "Maybe we should look for something closer?" Cassidy suggested. "There are a lot of manufacturing plants in Minneapolis." After a week of searching, they found a small factory in the suburbs that specialized in plastic parts for the automotive industry. The owner, an elderly Latino man named Ramon Espinoza, was immediately interested in their project. "I like entrepreneurs who make real things," he said, examining the prototype. "I'm tired of these app startups. Give me the drawings and we'll make a test batch." The first industrial batch of brushes, 500 pieces, rolled off the assembly line 5 weeks later. It wasn't without its problems. The mold had to be adjusted twice, the optimal plastic had to be selected, and the molding temperature had to be adjusted. Cassidy spent all her free time at the factory, watching the production process and making improvements. "I've never seen a designer get so involved in the manufacturing process," Ramon remarked as they inspected the fresh batch together. "Most people send in drawings and wait for the finished product." "I've spent too many years cleaning floors to not make sure every brush is perfect," Cassidy replied. The first customers were small cleaning companies in Minneapolis, including the one where Cassidy had once worked. The equipment manager they met at the first demonstration kept her word and placed an order for 50 brushes for testing. "50 is just the beginning," she said on the phone. "If they live up to expectations, we'll convert our entire fleet to your model." The feedback was enthusiastic. The competitive advantage of Cassidy's brush was too obvious to ignore: improved cleaning efficiency, no breakdowns due to clogging, and longer service life. The savings on each machine amounted to hundreds of dollars a year. Orders began to pour in from other cities in Minnesota, then from neighboring states. By the end of the third month, it was clear that Ramon's factory would not be able to meet the growing demand. "We need to expand," Pierce said, studying the sales reports. "And fast." They rented a manufacturing facility in South Minneapolis and purchased equipment for their own production line. They had to hire their first employees, machine operators, a logistics manager, and an accountant. With the money she earned, Cassidy was able to move out of her tiny apartment into a decent studio closer to downtown. "I feel like an imposter," she admitted to Pierce as they sat in her new apartment overlooking the Mississippi River. "Not long ago, I was cleaning other people's toilets, and now I have employees and a company. That's called social mobility." He smiled. "And you deserve every inch of it. Don't let imposter syndrome steal your joy of success." The first signs of real success came 6 months after production began. An article in the industry magazine Cleaning Industry Review caught the attention of major market players. Cassidy received an invitation to an international cleaning equipment exhibition in Chicago. "This is your chance to go national," said Holt, their investor. "If you can interest even one major floor cleaning machine manufacturer, your growth will be exponential." The exhibition proved to be a turning point. Representatives from Nordic-Clean, the second-largest manufacturer of cleaning equipment in the country, became interested in Cassidy's technology. After 3 rounds of negotiations, they offered a contract to license the patent for use in their machines. $1 million for the first year, plus royalties on every unit sold, Pierce announced when he returned from the final meeting. "Cassidy, you're a millionaire." She couldn't believe her ears. $1 million, a sum that seemed abstract, unreal, a sum that would completely change her life. "What now?" she asked, still in shock. "Now we scale up," Pierce replied. "Nordic-Clean is just the beginning. There are 24 other manufacturers that could use our technology. Plus, we'll continue to produce brushes under our own brand for the aftermarket." And so the whirlwind began again. A new office in downtown Minneapolis, hiring new staff, negotiating with new partners. Cassidy threw herself into her work, often forgetting to eat or sleep. Her life had taken a dramatic turn, from cleaning lady to successful entrepreneur in less than a year. "You need to learn to delegate," Pierce said gently when he found her in the office at 3 a.m. "No one expects the CEO to check every detail herself. I'm just not sure I'm ready to let go," Cassidy admitted. "This is my baby." "I understand," he nodded. "But the company is growing, and you can't keep your finger on the pulse of everything forever. You need to learn to trust your team." She tried to follow his advice. She hired a professional operations director and delegated day-to-day production issues to him. She found an experienced financial manager who streamlined the cash flow. She formed a sales department so she wouldn't have to negotiate with every customer personally. but she still couldn't break the habit of personally checking the quality of the products. Once a week, she would come to the factory, take random samples from the conveyor belt, and test them, just like in the old days. "The boss is inspecting again," the workers joked, but there was respect in their voices. They knew that Cassidy understood production from the inside, not just managing from an office. The company's revenues grew exponentially. By the end of the first year, Castech Innovations' turnover exceeded $5 million, and the staff expanded to 30 people. For the first time in her life, Cassidy could afford not to think about money. She bought a spacious apartment in a historic building in Minneapolis, paid off her college loans, and even started investing. But the external trappings of success didn't interest her much. Much more important was the feeling of fulfilling her potential, something her father had always talked about. Her father, her family. In the whirlwind of events, Cassidy had hardly been in touch with her relatives. The monthly dinners stopped, first because of her busy schedule, then because of her growing detachment. She didn't tell her parents about her success, putting off the conversation every time. "Why don't you want them to know?" Pierce asked when she once again avoided the subject of family. "It's hard to explain," Cassidy sighed. "I guess I want to achieve something really meaningful first, to prove that I'm not just a lucky inventor of a toothbrush." "You've already proven more than most people do in a lifetime." Pierce shook his head. "But I understand. Parental approval? It's complicated." Her brother Fletcher was the only member of her family who knew the truth. Cassidy had made him promise not to tell their parents until she was ready. "It's not fair to them," he objected. "Especially your mom. She's worried about why you stopped coming to dinner." "I'm just not ready for their reaction," Cassidy admitted, "especially my dad. He always knew I could achieve more. And now that I've finally done something, I'm afraid he'll say, 'I told you so.'" "Your father would be proud of you," Fletcher said confidently. "He can be tough sometimes, but he always wanted the best for you." Cassidy promised to think about it, but she kept putting off the conversation. Instead, she threw herself into her work with even greater zeal. The company's growth required new ideas. Cassidy began working on improvements to the original brush and developing related products. In her spare time, she sketched, designed, and tested prototypes again, now using professional equipment and materials. "You have an exceptional talent for seeing opportunities for improvement in the most ordinary things," their chief engineer remarked one day. "Most people just don't notice the problems they encounter every day." "I think it's because I did this work with my own hands," Cassidy replied. "When you wash the floors yourself, you immediately see what works and what doesn't." She hired 2 engineering graduates from her former college to help with development. Sometimes, watching them work, Cassidy couldn't help thinking that in a parallel universe, she could have been in their shoes, a young engineer at someone else's company, not the founder of her own. 15 months after founding the company, Cassidy received an offer that could change everything. Global Cleaning Systems, a major international manufacturer of cleaning equipment, offered to buy Castech Innovations for $35 million. "It's an offer that's hard to turn down," Pierce admitted as they discussed it in the office conference room. "You'll get about $20 million after investor shares and taxes. Financial independence for life." "What about the company, the employees?" Cassidy asked. "The offer states that they will keep production in Minneapolis for at least 3 years," Pierce replied. "And they want you to stay on as head of R&D for the same period." Cassidy hesitated. On the one hand, the amount was astronomical, but on the other, she was just beginning to enjoy running her own company. "I'm not rushing into a decision," she said. "This is too important to decide on impulse." "That's reasonable," Pierce nodded. "We have 30 days to respond. Use that time to think it over." That night, Cassidy hardly slept. $35 million. More money than she could have imagined a year ago. Money that would change her life and her family's life forever. With that kind of money, she could start a new company, take on any project she'd ever dreamed of. But there was a downside. Castech wasn't just a business. It was proof of her abilities, her vision. She'd built the company from the ground up. It was her baby. Selling it now, in its infancy, seemed premature. The next morning, she woke up with a feeling of déjà vu. Exactly a year and a half ago, she was cleaning other people's houses, struggling with awkward floor brushes. Now, the world's largest manufacturer of these machines was offering millions for her solution to the problem. Cassidy sent a message to Fletcher asking if he could meet her that evening. Perhaps it was time to finally tell her family about her achievements. But first, she needed advice from her brother, the only person who knew her before and after her success, the only one who always believed in her, even when she was just a cleaner. And then, perhaps, she would be ready to make a decision about the future of the company, a decision that would determine the next chapter of her life. I understand that reconciliation with the family should not be included at the end of the chapter. I'm revising and rewriting the last few paragraphs to make the chapter fit the plan. The final scene should end with an emotional confrontation with her father and family. After much deliberation, Cassidy rejected the offer to sell Global Cleaning Systems. Instead, she proposed an exclusive partnership that would allow her to retain control of Castech Innovations. The agreement provided for joint use of the patent and the development of new products, but left Cassidy with ownership of the technology and the company. "That's a risky move," Pierce remarked when she told him her decision. "But I like your determination. If Global agrees, it could pay off much more in the long run." To everyone's surprise, the industry giant accepted the offer. Global Cleaning Systems Management saw potential not only in Cassidy's current invention, but also in her ability to innovate in an industry that had rarely seen significant technical breakthroughs. "We are interested in a long-term partnership with Miss Murphy and her team," announced Global's CEO at a joint press conference. "Her perspective on the cleaning industry is unique. This partnership promises to be revolutionary." The contract, signed at the beginning of the company's third year, guaranteed Castech a minimum payment of $20 million annually, plus a percentage of sales of all devices using the patented technology. The deal instantly transformed the small Minneapolis company into a major player in the global market. "Now we can afford a real research center," Cassidy said enthusiastically as she reviewed the terms of the contract, "and hire the best engineers. And move into an office that matches our new status," Pierce added with a smile. "I think it's time to leave these modest premises." The new headquarters of Castech Innovations was located in a modern business center in a prestigious area of Minneapolis. 3 floors of glass and steel overlooking the river and the city. A spacious research department, equipped with the latest technology, occupied an entire floor. Within a year of signing the contract, the company's staff had grown to 120. Cassidy was personally involved in selecting key employees, especially for the research department. She was looking not only for technical skills, but also for the ability to see non-obvious solutions to everyday problems. "Hire people with real-world experience, not just degrees," she instructed the HR department. "Find me someone who has cleaned swimming pools or worked in a car repair shop. I need practitioners, not just theorists." This approach paid off. Over the next 2 years, Castech patented 7 new inventions, each of which significantly improved various aspects of the cleaning industry, from filtration systems to methods for treating wastewater after industrial cleaning. The revolutionary water recycling system developed by Cassidy's team reduced water consumption in industrial cleaning by 60%. This not only reduced costs, but also made the process more environmentally friendly, an important consideration in an era of growing concern about environmental issues. The company's revenue exceeded $100 million in its 4th year. Castech entered the European and Asian markets, opening offices in Berlin and Singapore. Cassidy Murphy's name began to appear in business publications as an example of a successful entrepreneur of the new generation. "It's amazing how quickly everything has changed," she remarked to Pierce as she leafed through a business magazine with her photo on the centerfold. 4 years ago, I was invisible cleaning other people's toilets. You've always been much more than that. It's just that not everyone saw it," he replied, "including yourself." Despite her resounding success, Cassidy still hadn't told her family about the changes in her life. Fletcher had repeatedly insisted that it was time to come clean to her parents, but she always found reasons to postpone the conversation. "They don't even know I'm not a cleaner anymore," she confessed to her brother during one of their rare meetings. "I just stopped going to family dinners, and you've kept your mouth shut like we agreed." This is getting ridiculous, Cass. Fletcher shook his head. Mom asks about you all the time. Dad's worried too, even if he doesn't show it. I know, she sighed. It's just, I need to do this right, on my own terms. What terms? You're a successful businesswoman, a millionaire. Just come home and tell them the truth. Cassidy didn't answer. She couldn't explain why she was so determined to hide her success from her family. Perhaps part of her still wanted to hear her father apologize for his doubts, or maybe she was afraid that her parents would want to take advantage of her wealth. But deep down, she knew that the main reason was something else. She wanted the recognition of her achievements to be absolute and unconditional. At the beginning of the 5th year of Castech's history, an event occurred that completely changed the status of the company and its founder. Forbes magazine included Cassidy Murphy in its annual list of billionaires, estimating her net worth at $1.2 billion. Congratulations, you're officially a billionaire. Pierce smiled as he entered her office with a copy of the magazine that had just been delivered. You're now in a club that most people can only dream of joining. Cassidy took the magazine and looked at her own photo next to a brief biography. The youngest self-made female billionaire, read the headline. The article briefly recounted her success story, from cleaning lady to inventor and founder of a company that revolutionized the cleaning industry. It's a strange feeling, she said, flipping through the pages. It's like it's about someone else. Get used to it, said Pierce. Being a billionaire attracts attention. They've already called, wanting to interview you for TV. A TV interview? Cassidy frowned. I'm not sure that's a good idea. On the contrary, Pierce objected. It's a great opportunity to promote the Castech brand. Besides, your story is inspiring. Think of how many young women might find motivation in it to achieve their own goals. The argument convinced Cassidy. Despite her dislike of publicity, she understood that her example could really help others, especially those who, like her once, had worked in low-paying jobs without the opportunity to get an education. The interview was scheduled for Thursday evening. Cassidy chose her most formal business suit for the occasion, dark blue with minimal accessories. She didn't want to look like a typical tycoon flaunting her wealth. Don't be nervous, the company's PR director advised her before she went in. Just be yourself. Your sincerity is your greatest asset. The interviewer, an experienced financial journalist from CNBC, began with traditional questions about Castech's business model and the company's plans, but gradually moved on to Cassidy's personal history. Tell us about your journey, he asked. How did you go from working as a cleaner to being on the Forbes billionaire list? It seems almost unbelievable. Cassidy hesitated for a moment, but then decided to answer as honestly as possible. I see a certain irony in that, she began. A job that many consider unprestigious ultimately led me to an invention that changed my life. I spent 3 years cleaning other people's homes and faced the same problem every day. Inefficient brushes in floor cleaning machines. She talked about creating the first prototype, meeting Pierce, fighting for the patent, and the company's first steps. As she spoke, her initial nervousness faded, giving way to the confidence of someone who really knows their stuff. Did you have support from your family? The journalist asked. Successful entrepreneurs often have parents who believed in them from the very beginning. Cassidy paused for a moment. It was a difficult question. I have a complicated relationship with my family, she finally said. My father. He always wanted more from me, but he didn't believe I was capable of achieving it. He used to say to me, "You pathetic girl, still cleaning other people's houses." I think he just didn't want me to get stuck in a job that didn't use my potential. And what do they think of your success now? Cassidy couldn't suppress a sad smile. Actually, they still don't know. We haven't been in touch for the last few years, and they probably still think I'm a cleaner. The journalist couldn't hide his surprise. You mean your family doesn't know you're a Forbes billionaire? That's right, Cassidy nodded. Strange, isn't it? But I've always planned to tell them when I'm ready. Maybe this interview will be the moment that finally pushes me to take that step. The rest of the interview went smoothly. Cassidy talked about the technical aspects of her inventions, corporate social responsibility, and the company's future plans. The journalist was impressed by her sincerity and depth of knowledge. When she returned home after the interview, Cassidy felt a strange sense of relief. By speaking publicly about her relationship with her family, she felt as if she had taken the first step toward reconciliation. But she had no idea how quickly the story would unfold. The interview aired the following evening during prime time. To the surprise of the TV station, it caused a huge stir. The story of a young woman who rose from cleaning jobs to billionaire status without even telling her family was too intriguing to go unnoticed. By Saturday morning, excerpts from the interview were all over social media. By lunchtime, Cassidy Murphy's story was the main topic on almost every entertainment website. By evening, even serious publications were publishing analytical articles about the phenomenon of hidden success and the psychological reasons why people might hide their achievements from their loved ones. Cassidy's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, talk show producers, even Hollywood screenwriters, everyone wanted exclusive details. She turned off the sound and forwarded all requests to the PR department. "You're a sensation," Pierce told her when they met at the office on Sunday. "Castech's stock is up 30% in 2 days. This story is more powerful than any advertising campaign." Cassidy nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She was waiting for another call from her family. If the interview had really gotten that much exposure, there was a good chance that her parents or someone they knew had seen it. The call came closer to evening. Her brother's number lit up on her phone. "Fletcher," she answered anxiously. "Did you see the news?" he asked without preamble. "I know the interview was published, but I haven't been following the reaction," Cassidy replied cautiously. "No, not that." Fletcher's voice sounded tense. "The news about my parents. They're at the door. Reporters. Dozens of them. Everyone's trying to get an interview with the family of the secret billionaire." Cassidy froze. She hadn't expected this turn of events. They saw my interview?" "No," Fletcher replied. "But the neighbors did. They called and told us. Mom is in shock. Dad doesn't believe a word of it. He thinks it's some kind of mistake or a prank." "I'm on my way," Cassidy said firmly. "Ask them not to talk to the reporters until I get there." She hung up and immediately called her driver. While showering and changing, she mentally rehearsed what she would say to her parents. All the words she had rehearsed for years now seemed inappropriate. When she went down to the garage, her driver, Daniel, was already waiting by the car, a discreet, dark gray Rolls-Royce Ghost that Cassidy had bought after signing her contract with Global. "Phillips," she said, getting into the back seat. "And I'm afraid there will be reporters there." "Understood, ma'am." Daniel nodded. "Security has already sent 2 officers to the address. They will monitor the situation until we arrive." On the way, Cassidy tried to imagine her father's face when he saw her getting out of the Rolls-Royce. Wade Murphy, with his practicality and contempt for ostentatious wealth, had never approved of luxury cars. "A waste of money," he used to say. And now his daughter, whom he considered a failure, was arriving in a car that cost as much as his house. As they approached her parents' house, it became clear that the situation was even worse than Fletcher had described. The entire street was filled with news vans, reporters with cameras, and onlookers from neighboring houses. "Daniel, stop here," Cassidy said, noticing 2 burly men in black suits at the gate. "I'll go with security." The appearance of the Rolls-Royce caused a new wave of excitement among the crowd. When Cassidy got out of the car, camera flashes lit up the street. She ignored the reporters' shouts and headed straight for the house, accompanied by security guards. Fletcher opened the door, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "They're in the living room," he said quietly. "The situation is tense." Cassidy nodded and went inside. Her parents' house seemed smaller and older than she remembered. Or maybe she had changed, having grown accustomed to the spaciousness of her new life. In the living room, her mother sat on the sofa, clutching a handkerchief in her hands. Her father stood by the window, the curtain pulled back, watching grimly at the street below. When Cassidy entered, they both turned to her. "Cassidy!" Elaine exclaimed, rising from the sofa. "What's going on? Why are all these people here? They're saying strange things about you." Before Cassidy could answer, her father interrupted. They say you're some kind of billionaire, he said incredulously. That you own a company, that you invented a brush? He uttered the last word with such skepticism that Cassidy couldn't help but smile. It was so typical of him, not even trying to believe in her success. Yes, Dad, she replied calmly. It's all true. I invented a special brush for floor polishers. I patented it. I started a company, and yes, I'm actually on the Forbes billionaire list. There was a long silence. Elaine slowly sank back onto the couch, staring at her daughter with wide eyes. Wade frowned even more. Is this some kind of joke? He finally said. You expect us to believe that you went from being a cleaning lady to a billionaire? Because of a brush? That's right. Cassidy nodded. And I'm not a cleaning lady anymore. It's been 4 years. But why didn't you tell us? Elaine's voice trembled. We thought you were avoiding us because you were ashamed of your job. Cassidy took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. I avoided you because I wasn't ready for this conversation, she said honestly. Because I was afraid that even if I became successful, I still wouldn't be good enough in your eyes. Especially in yours, Dad. Wade opened his mouth to argue, but Cassidy raised her hand to stop him. The last thing you said to me before I stopped coming to family dinners was, "You pathetic girl, still cleaning other people's houses." I couldn't get those words out of my head. Every time I achieved something new, I thought about them, and part of me wanted to prove to you how wrong you were. Wade's face paled. He remembered that evening, remembered his words, but he never imagined they had hurt his daughter so deeply. I just wanted you to strive for more, he said quietly. I saw that you were capable of more than just cleaning. I know, Cassidy nodded, but you chose the worst way to motivate me. And here's the result. I've achieved more than any of us could have imagined, but we lost 4 years of communication. An awkward silence filled the room. Elaine shifted her gaze from her daughter to her husband, not knowing what to say. Fletcher shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other in the doorway. Outside the window, reporters' cameras continued to flash. So you really are a billionaire? Wade finally said, his voice a mixture of disbelief, pride, and something like shame. Cassidy nodded. And that Rolls-Royce outside, is that yours? Her father asked, glancing out the window. Yes, she confirmed. It's mine. Wade Murphy, who had worked with his hands his entire life and had been raised to believe that only hard physical labor had value, stood before his daughter, a billionaire, a company CEO, an inventor, and couldn't find the words. The first week after Cassidy's arrival at her parents' home turned into a never-ending stream of journalists besieging both Cassidy's mansion and her parents' modest home. The story was too tempting for the media. A billionaire daughter who had hidden her success from her own family was perfect headline material. We'll have to hire security for your house too, said Jeffrey, Cassidy's head of security, when reporters began staking out the Murphy Sr.'s home around the clock. Elaine didn't agree right away. To her, the presence of security guards in their modest neighborhood seemed unreal, like something out of a movie. However, the aggressiveness of some of the paparazzi made her change her mind. Wade remained silent throughout all these changes. The man who always had an opinion on everything now seemed lost. In his worldview, a successful daughter should look different, perhaps a doctor or a lawyer, but certainly not the head of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Their first real conversation after the secret was revealed took place 10 days later, when the media storm had died down a little. Cassidy invited her father to her office, deciding that neutral territory would be the best place for a difficult conversation. Wade had never been to the skyscrapers of downtown Minneapolis before. When the private elevator took him to the 47th floor, directly to the spacious reception area of Castech Innovations, he couldn't hide his surprise. "Miss Murphy is waiting for you," the secretary said cheerfully, showing him to the office door. Cassidy was just as nervous as her father. Rising from her desk, she met him at the door. "Hi, Dad. Thanks for coming." Wade nodded awkwardly, looking around the office, a spacious room with panoramic windows overlooking the city. Patent certificates and industry awards hung on the walls, and on a separate shelf, stood the very first toothbrush, assembled from materials at hand. "Impressive," he said, a mixture of pride and embarrassment in his voice. "Would you like some coffee?" Cassidy offered. "Or would you like me to show you around?" "Let's talk first," Wade replied, sitting down in a visitor's chair. Cassidy returned to her seat. Between them lay a gulf of unspoken words and old hurts. "Why didn't you tell us?" he finally asked. "All these years. We thought you were still cleaning other people's houses." Cassidy took a deep breath. She had asked herself that question countless times. "At first, I wasn't sure it would work out," she replied. "Then I started to see some success, but I was afraid to jinx it. And then it was too late. The longer I put off this conversation, the harder it was to start." She paused, then added, "And to be honest, part of me wanted to prove to you that I could succeed without your approval and support. It was my way of responding to your pathetic girl comment." Wade flinched at his own words. "I never thought you were pathetic," he said quietly. "I just saw that you were capable of more. I wanted to push you." "There are different ways to push, Dad," Cassidy interrupted. "You chose a way that made me feel like I wasn't good enough." "Never good enough." Wade lowered his eyes, staring at his workman's hands, the hands of a man who had spent his entire life doing physical labor. "I don't know how to do it any other way," he admitted. "That's how I was raised. My father never praised me, only demanded more. I thought that was the right thing to do." For the first time in her life, Cassidy saw her father's vulnerability. The man who had always seemed like an unshakable authority figure suddenly appeared ordinary, flawed, and confused. "I'm proud of you," Wade said suddenly, looking up. "I've always been proud of you, even when you were a cleaning lady. I just didn't know how to show it." The words Cassidy had waited her whole life to hear finally came out. But instead of the triumph she had expected, she felt only a quiet sadness for the years lost and the words left unsaid. "Thank you, Dad," she replied. "That means a lot to me." After that conversation, the ice began to melt. Wade started coming to Cassidy's office regularly, taking an interest in her work. He never asked for money or help. He was interested in the process itself, in how the business his daughter had created was working. Elaine adapted more quickly. After the initial shock, she enthusiastically immersed herself in her new life, enjoying attending charity events where Cassidy was present. To her daughter's surprise, her mother quickly found common ground with Minneapolis's high society, displaying unexpected social flexibility. "I always knew you were special," Elaine said during one of their new weekly lunches. "Remember when you took apart and put back together the toaster when you were 5 because it wasn't heating up right?" Cassidy laughed. "And you scolded me for playing with electrical appliances." "Not for that," her mother shook her head, "for not unplugging it first, but the toaster did work better after that." Moments of understanding and acceptance gradually healed old wounds. However, Cassidy's new status also created unexpected complications. Now she wasn't just a daughter and a sister. She was a billionaire, a public figure, someone whose name was known by thousands. One day, Fletcher, with whom she had always had a close relationship, confessed, "Sometimes I don't know how to talk to you anymore, Cass. You've become someone else." Those words hurt her more than she expected. "I'm still the same," she replied. "It's just that my circumstances have changed." "But they've changed you," her brother insisted. "You've become tougher, more confident, sometimes even colder." "It's called professional growth," Cassidy tried to joke. But inside she felt a twinge of unease. Had success really changed her beyond recognition? That question haunted her for months. Juggling the demands of running a growing company, new social obligations, and rebuilding her family relationships, Cassidy often found herself thinking that she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She liked her new life, the power, the opportunities, the respect. But sometimes she longed for the simplicity of her former days, when her only concern was to finish cleaning on time and not get caught by her capricious employers. "You know what's ironic?" she said to Pierce one day as they sat in her office late at night discussing a new technology. "I used to be invisible to rich clients. Now I'm invisible to ordinary people. All they see is my money and status. Pierce nodded thoughtfully. There are different kinds of invisibility, but in both cases, people don't see the real you. Who is the real me? Cassidy asked, her voice sounding genuinely confused. The question remained unanswered, but it made her rethink some aspects of her life. Cassidy began to devote more time to personal projects and less to high-profile initiatives that were important to her. She established a scholarship program for young women interested in engineering. She launched a project to support small businesses in disadvantaged neighborhoods in Minneapolis. And, to her particular delight, she created professional retraining courses for cleaning company employees who wanted to get a technical education. "It's my way of giving back," she explained to a journalist who asked her about her motivation. "I've been where they are now, and I know that sometimes it only takes one chance to change your life." Alongside her community work, Cassidy continued to develop Castech. The company grew to international scale, opening offices in 12 countries. The number of employees exceeded 1,000. But most importantly, she remained true to her original vision: to create simple solutions to complex problems. A new line of eco-friendly cleaning products developed by Cassidy's team revolutionized the market. Using biodegradable materials and innovative filtration technologies, Castech offered solutions that significantly reduced water and chemical consumption while maintaining effectiveness. "We don't just make brushes," Cassidy liked to repeat at corporate meetings. "We're changing the industry for the better, for the planet, for our customers, and for the people who do this work every day." Cassidy's personal life also underwent changes. Romantic relationships proved to be one of the most difficult areas to adapt to her new status. After several unsuccessful attempts at dating men, most of whom were either blinded by her wealth or felt uncomfortable in the shadow of her success, she decided to take a break. "Maybe you should try meeting someone in your circle," Elaine suggested during one of their lunches. "Another successful entrepreneur who won't feel threatened by your status." "It's not that, Mom," Cassidy shook her head. "I just don't have time for a relationship right now. The company requires my full attention." But the truth was more complicated. After years of being invisible, then a workaholic building a business, and now a public billionaire, Cassidy found it difficult to be herself. Simple, vulnerable, imperfect. This internal struggle came to a head 2 years after her secret was revealed. Forbes magazine was preparing a special feature on Cassidy, planning to make her the cover girl for their next issue. Her office, her home, and, at the editor's insistence, her parents' modest house in the Phillips neighborhood were chosen as locations for the photo shoot. The family dinner organized for the photo shoot was meant to symbolize Cassidy's journey from a simple girl from a working-class family to an industry titan. However, what was intended to be a staged event unexpectedly turned into a moment of truth. That evening, everyone gathered around the table. Cassidy, her parents, Fletcher with his wife and their little daughter, who was named after her aunt. Photographers set up their equipment, stylists fixed hairstyles and clothes. Everything looked perfect. Perhaps too perfect. "Now, Miss Murphy, tell us a little about your family traditions," the journalist asked as the cameras started clicking. "What do these dinners mean to you?" Cassidy opened her mouth, ready to deliver a prepared speech about family values and support. But to her surprise, she fell silent. Her gaze fell on her father, on his expensive suit, which she had bought him for the occasion, and which now looked ill-fitting. On her mother, whose hands, despite her expensive manicure, still bore the marks of decades of housework. On her brother, who looked at her with slight confusion. And suddenly she realized that this whole performance was just another mask, another version of invisibility. Only now they were all hiding behind the glossy facade of a successful billionaire family. "You know," she began slowly, putting down her fork, "these dinners weren't always pleasant. I used to hate them because I felt like I could never live up to my father's expectations." Silence hung in the room. The journalist glanced nervously at the photographer. Cassidy, the PR director who was present at the shoot, tensed up. "And then I stopped coming altogether," she continued. "For 4 years. I hid my success because part of me wanted to prove that I was worth something. And even now, sitting here, I'm not sure we've completely resolved our issues." Wade looked at his daughter, his eyes filled with surprise mixed with something akin to respect. "But you know what I realized?" Cassidy glanced around the room. "Real success isn't billions in the bank or articles in Forbes. It's the ability to be honest with yourself and with the people you care about, even if that honesty is uncomfortable or imperfect." She turned to the journalist. "You want to know about my family traditions? Here they are. We learn to tell the truth. We learn to see each other as we are, not as we want to be. And that's much harder than inventing a new toothbrush or building a company." Her parents looked at her with surprise and, it seemed, some relief. Fletcher smiled and nodded slightly, as if to say, "There she is, my real sister." The journalist, recovering from the unexpected turn, asked the next question. "And how do you think you're doing, seeing each other for who you really are?" Cassidy looked at her father. "Dad?" Wade cleared his throat, clearly unaccustomed to being the center of attention. "My daughter has always been stubborn," he began, "and too smart for her own good. When she was little, I worried that the world would break her, so I tried to make her tougher, stronger. But in the end," he looked straight at Cassidy, "she turned out to be stronger than I could ever have imagined. And not because of me, but in spite of me." It was the most candid admission Cassidy had ever heard from her father. No drama, no fancy words, just an honest assessment. "I'm proud of you," Wade added quietly, "not because you're rich or famous, but because you've stayed true to yourself, no matter what." Elaine, touched by this exchange, added, "We're still learning to be a family, in a new way. It doesn't always go smoothly, but we're trying." The journalist looked as if he had gotten much more than he expected from a standard article about a successful entrepreneur. Sensing the moment, the photographers began shooting without staging or direction. The rest of the evening passed in a surprisingly sincere atmosphere. They talked about the past without bitterness, about the present without embellishment, and about the future without excessive expectations. For the first time in a long time, Cassidy felt that she could just be herself. Not a cleaner, not a billionaire, not a model daughter, but simply Cassidy Murphy. When the journalists finally left, the family remained at the table in no hurry to leave. "I'm not sure your PR people will be happy with that interview," Fletcher remarked with a smile. "They'll get used to it," Cassidy shrugged. "It's a new policy. Less glamour, more reality." Wade, sitting at the head of the table, suddenly laughed. A deep, hearty laugh that Cassidy hadn't heard in years. "Who would have thought," he said, shaking his head, "my daughter, whom I called a pathetic girl who cleaned other people's houses. And now magazines are writing about her wisdom." "I learned a lot cleaning those houses, Dad," Cassidy replied. "More than you think. To see problems that others don't notice. To find solutions when there seem to be none. To be patient. To be invisible when necessary, and visible when necessary." She glanced around the table, a place where she had once felt small and insignificant, but now felt like she was part of something bigger, equal among equals. "You know, I'm grateful for the journey," she added quietly. "All the hard parts. It made me who I am." Wade nodded, accepting her words. His gaze conveyed not just paternal approval but genuine respect, something Cassidy had always wanted from him. "To new beginnings," Fletcher proposed, raising his glass. "And to never forget where we came from," Cassidy added. They clinked glasses and then continued the evening talking about simple, everyday things. The roof repairs on her parents' house, her little niece's first steps, Elaine's new hobby of gardening. When it was time to leave, Cassidy hugged each member of her family. Hugging her father, she whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, even if you did it your way." Wade held her tightly in his arms without saying a word, but Cassidy knew that this silent gesture meant more than any words could express. Stepping onto the porch of her parents' house, she paused for a moment, looking up at the starry sky. Waiting for her at the curb was her Rolls-Royce with a driver, a symbol of the world she now inhabited. But here, in the quiet neighborhood where she had grown up, Cassidy felt a strange sense of completion. She had come full circle, from a girl who dreamed of more to a woman who had achieved more than she ever dreamed of, and was now learning to appreciate the simple truths of life once again. Perhaps that was what true success was all about. Not the numbers in your bank account or the headlines, but the ability to remain true to yourself despite all the masks you have to wear in this world. Getting into her car, Cassidy smiled at her reflection in the tinted window. Invisible, inventor, billionaire, daughter, sister. All these roles were parts of one personality, and perhaps her most valuable invention was the ability to reconcile them all without losing herself.